In the passages of non-legal question and answer from the jury, the judge and the witnesses, you can see such speech-based features as elision of subordinate to that, as in, do you remember what month it was you found the gun? The day that the gunner told me he found the gun to be drawn. You can see lack of standard number agreement between subject and verb, non-standard past participles. Was the guns loaded by you before? Use of a plus verb plus sing, as in a purging. Do support distribution is like present day English, unlike the legal English that we just saw. So you've got no periphrastic do, you've just got question and negative do. And these are features of the Southern English dialect of the day, and the same or similar non-standard features are still found in present-day United States Southern dialects. The white planters are frequently represented as speaking in such non-standard Southern English dialect. Now, I can't assume that the St Helena white planters and soldiers formed a single dialect, totally homogeneous speech community in the late 1600s and early 1700s, but their speech before the court was predominantly Southern, despite the presence of at least one Scottish planter and one Irish planter. I'm going to give you a further example of white speech from 1706, and I'm really sorry about the content. This is a rather distressing case. Daniel Griffith, church warden for this present hour, informed the governor and council that Hatton Starling, single man, being moved by the instigation of the devil, attempted to deflower Elizabeth, the daughter of Henry Francis, aged 3 years or thereabouts. Upon which the said Hatton Starling was summoned to appear before us this day, who accordingly did. Then Margaret Francis, mother of the said child, was sworn and declareth as follows: that on Thursday, the 19th day of February last past, the said Hatton Starling came home from fishing, and some time after dinner my husband and the said Hatton Starling went into the hall to snood some fish hooks, as I suppose. A little while after, my husband went up to Francis Wrangham's house and left Hatton Starling lying down upon the bed, where my little girl, named Elizabeth, run to him and played to and fro in the room. A little time after, I, being setting in the kitchen, heard the child make a noise as though she had been pulling away from him, as I believe she was, and heard him say, "Come here, Betty." "No," said she, "I won't, I'll go to my mum," and came running to me, and said, "Mum, Hatton put his cock to my cock." Whereupon I pushed her away, but she would not go, saying over again as before. Then I got up and took her on one side, and looked upon her secret parts, where to my great amaze and grief saw the sign of his lustful nature, and some spots upon her shift. Whereupon went with the child in my hand to the said Hatton Starling, as he lay upon the bed, and said, "You beastly dog, what have you done to my child?" "Why, what have I done, Mrs. Francis?" said he. "What?" says I. "Ask the child," who made answer immediately, "You did put your cock to my cock." "No," says he. "Indeed, Mrs. Francis, I never did," with a great many protestations. "Yes, Mr. Hatton, you did put your cock to my cock," replied the child, "and pissed in me too, and would have pissed more, but I would not let you." Then I pulled off the child's shift and threw it at him, saying, "If you won't believe me, look there yourself." Then he began to curse and swear he never did any such thing. "No," says I wonder how you can have the impudence to deny it. If you don't go away, I'll send for Mr. Huskisson and make you a liar." Whereupon he went into the shop, but I was not willing to let him stay, bidding him be gone. And it goes on in that case. Well, non-standard or colloquial lexical items in this passage are that verb to snood, snooding the hooks. OED lists the verb to snade as being a piece cut from the tail of a mackerel used for bait. It's listed only once as Cornish dialect feature, and it's made it over to St Helena, meaning to bait the fish hook. That term cock, well, the Oxford English Dictionary does not mention cock as a term for the female genitalia, only for the male, but apparently it is known in the United States in various dialects. That informal term mum, now that's a southern term. It's first attested in the OED around 1595. The earlier form is ma'am, and that is still in use in northern English dialects. Setting, as in I being setting in the kitchen, that was still in use in early 20th century London English. Amaze as a noun, pissed, obviously colloquial. The a preposition, as in took her a one side. And then you've got a whole load of discourse markers, such as why, what have I done? And what, says I? This beastly dog Hatton would have debauched your child. Indeed. No, says he. Indeed, Mrs. Francis, I never did. So all of those things indicate speech-based features. And there are non-standard or colloquial syntactical constructions as well, such as my little girl named Elizabeth run to him rather than ran to him. You've got non-agreement of verb and pronoun. What says I? You've got the southern negator never, which is still very much alive in London English. Indeed, Mrs. Francis, I never did. And non-subjunctive was, obviously, the one that we use today, if I was to stay here 100 years. Now, the St Helena consultations provide evidence that this is the kind of informal speech used by the white community. Black slaves didn't often speak before the court, but occasionally they did, and the rest of this paper will consider their speech. The majority of it is in indirect reportage, occasionally sprinkled with transcription of direct speech. I'll give you an example from 1695. Hannah, a slave of Mr. Thomas Goodwin's, examined, saith that Bevan's will told her last Thursday night that he would do something. Said she, what will you do? Oh, said Will, you will see by and by. So she urged and prayed him to tell her, but he would not. At length she got, the day after being Friday, some English tobacco from her master, though unknown either to her master or mistress, and then told the said Bevan Will she would give him some English tobacco if he would tell her. At length he took the English tobacco and told her that he, with Gargans, alias John Girling's Jack, Firebrass, and several others, this Firebrass was a slave of Greentree's orphans, would kill all the white people on the island, upon which she replied that she thought the whites were too strong for the blacks. Oh, said Will, we will venture that, for we will kill them at night, and that first they would go to Lemon Valley and kill the 2 soldiers there, and that he with Firebrass would kill his master and mistress, and Gargan's Jack would kill his master and mistress, and that others should be sent to kill Madam Johnson and her children, and each black concerned was to kill his respective master and mistress. Now, the 2 slaves, Hannah and Bevan's Will, their direct speech as recorded by the court recorder, is similar to the representations of the whites' discourse. It includes such non-Creole features as question-subject inversion, such as what will you do, modal verbs to indicate futurity, you will see, we will venture, we will kill. There are representations of speech-based discourse particles, such as, oh, said Will. And although they're represented as speaking the English of the day, notice that phrase by and by. It's become lexified in several present-day English-based Creoles. You might have picked up the lack of genitive S in the phrase Bevan Will, but that's unlikely to be a feature of pidginization. That's much more likely just to be a continuation of the early modern genitive zero marking. The next example is some more fragments of slaves' direct speech, also from 1695. Garrett, a slave of Elizabeth Girling, who dwells at Mr. Goodwin's, examined, saith that the 28th of November last past, Fortune, a slave of Samuel Taylor's, and Will, a slave of Owen Bevan's, were a-talking together, and in their discourse they laughed. So the said Garrett said to them, what's you laugh at? Cannot you tell me? No, replied Will, you are a rogue, you have no good heart, and I cannot trust you. So Garrett asked the said Fortune what 'twas that Will had told him. Well, said Fortune, I'll tell you tomorrow, who accordingly did. Will being then in company, though seemingly dubious of him, this night, if you'll be a good boy and not tell nobody, I'll tell you. So told him that they would kill all the white people, and asked him if he could deal with his master. Yes, said Garrett, I can deal with him well enough. Well, said Will, and I'll deal with my master and mistress well enough. But, said he to Garrett, if you think you cannot deal with your master, you shall have somebody to help you. And saith Will, after we have done that, we will go to Lemon Valley and kill the 2 soldiers there.